I'm Lonna Kelly, and this is Hudson Valley Art Speak. Thank you for watching tonight. Tonight we're going to be talking to Genevieve Jan. Genevieve is a contemporary art photographer and an art consultant. So thank you so much for coming today.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Oh, good, good. So you've been a photographer since, what, 6 years old or sixth grade?
Sixth grade, about
Sixth grade.
5th or 6th grade. It was a summer camp program that my parents put me in. I don't remember how old I was, but I remember I was excited because it was at the middle school, and I probably wasn't at the middle school yet, so
Yeah.
it must have been in 5th or 6th grade. But we learned how to roll film to develop with all the chemicals. We learned how to process black and white. We learned how to make pinhole cameras, which was the most exciting thing at the time for me, to be able to make it, go outside, have a picture, and come back in and develop it right away. Was
without
exciting.
a camera.
Yes, without a camera.
Yeah.
I think I've made at least 3 or 4 more pinhole cameras out of wood and
really?
metal and everything.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
ones that take 4x5 film and roll film. It was kind of a little enterprise for a long time for me.
Yeah, lately I've been doing a lot of experimenting with camera obscuras.
Yeah.
And having just so much fun with it.
It's really invigorating to kind of break it down to the single element of what photography is, which is just light through a small hole, basically. So
that's very true.
Yeah,
that's very true. So, do you still do a lot of experimental work, or do you?
I try to. I'm actually swinging back to where I began in terms of contemporary art and art photography, where you know, as you get older, you enter an industry where you need to make money, and you have health insurance and family and children. And now I'm kind of getting back a little onto the other side and having space in my brain to work with more art for art's sake, as opposed to documenting, you know, things for work, or documenting things to make money, or just taking pictures of my family, which in and of itself can be very creative at times.
It can be, yeah.
I'm starting to come back around to a little more experimental processes and experimental composition in terms of my personal art. So yeah.
Now, so do you have a show right now that you're showing at the Land Gallery in Pauling?
Yes.
And when you wrote about it, you mentioned that it was analog photography. Would you explain that?
Analog photography is basically what photography used to be before it became digital.
Right.
It's the work in the show is a mix of instant films, so Polaroid films, different kinds of Polaroid films, and 35 millimeter films that are either scanned in terms of their print or scanned from the negative and then reproduced on a art rag, which is kind of like a watercolor paper. And then the edges are torn very carefully so I don't wreck it, to kind of give it a texture. And I think a lot of the reason why I liked combining the paper and the torn edges is because the analog film is very different, in my opinion, than digital, when you kind of have this output where it's got a lot more texture to it, it's got a lot more depth to it, and as much as it might not be able to see it right off the bat, it definitely has a feeling that it invokes that has a little more humanity to it. So I really enjoyed combining the texture of the Polaroids and the film with the texture of the paper for the show that's up. It's going to be up all summer at the gallery.
I think it has a very warm feeling.
Yeah.
That I get from it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's digital is wonderful, and I use it constantly. But it definitely has a different emotion that it evokes when you see it. It doesn't have the liquid feeling that I think traditional 35 millimeter or other size film base and Polaroids have, because they are a wet process. So it's a chemical process. So you need the liquid to bring about the layers of color and light that are in your paper.
Yeah. So you worked at Polaroid for quite a while, didn't you? Did you get to experiment with a lot of different cameras and that giant Polaroid?
I did. I actually have a picture of myself on the 20 by 24 film.
Yeah.
So it's huge. It's in my house right now. It's
Really?
all rolled up, and I'm afraid to unroll it because I don't want it to damage it. But I did. I got to work with a couple different photographers that use the 20 by 24. So that was a really exciting couple weeks where I got to work with them.
It was.
And yeah, it's, I worked with the research and development department basically testing the different reiterations of film to see how they reacted to different temperatures and climates and environments, and then also when they're developing new films to see how they work, and whether you're shooting in cold or hot or humid or not humid. So I got to work with a lot of photographers who are actively working on the field, but then I got to work with a magical photography company that was, created this new enterprise in the 40s, and it was just a really interesting time because beyond working with all these different camera formats and film formats, everything from professional film photographers to graphing artists to the introduction of digital photography, which they kind of started with point and shoot cameras while I was still working there. So it was really fun to work with that.
I bet. Now, are they still making
They do.
Polaroid
Polaroid itself has gone out of business, but the material in the process has been sold to another company, and I don't know exactly who bought it, but there is a way you can get Polaroid films still today.
Yeah, I really love Polaroid Transfers.
Yeah.
I think they are so great.
Yeah. We've done, I think working in the field, because we'd go out and we'd shoot, but because of it was the research development, we'd shoot like 70 pictures of the same thing. Or if they needed a skin tone, like one of my partner or I would sit for 70 or 80 pictures.
Oh, really?
So we had a lot of time to kind of mess around and play with the films and stick them back together and peel them apart and crimple them up and transfer them. And so it was a lot of fun. It was a huge learning experience. I got to meet scientists and I got to meet artists, and it was fun.
Yeah. One of my very young nephews got a Polaroid for his part of his Christmas presents, and he is having just so much fun with it.
Yeah, my daughter has a little Instax, which is Fuji based, but similar process.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about your consulting. What kind of consulting work do you do?
I have a master's degree from New York University with visual art administration, so it's basically a business administration for art institutions. And so a lot of that I do for people is like the Jane Haslam is a photographer locally who I've worked with, and she basically just needed some help with different aspects of her business in terms of like how she manages her customers and how she manages her scheduling.
Yeah.
So it depends what kind of client I'm working for in terms of what aspect they need, but anything from marketing to customer management to how they finance themselves, lots of different aspects. And then the gallery that my show is at now, Land Gallery, is actually an enterprise from Jane, where she had a space that she wanted to change into a gallery. So, which was really right up my alley. So it was kind of a perfect little, the stars aligned for us. And so we really talked about, how to build a gallery physically, and then how to build the basis for it to become a successful enterprise in the market, which is even more difficult than just putting the brick and mortar parts together.
Yeah. Well, she had started off using it as studio space, is that right?
Yeah. But she was on location a lot.
Yeah.
So she was feeling that it was neglected, and she wanted to put it to better purpose.
Yeah.
And at the same time be able to fill a need in the community for art. And she's a wonderful photographer in herself.
Yes, she is.
I mean, her work is beautiful. So for us to be able to create an environment for her to show her work and for me to have an opportunity to show as well, and then to also have other members of the community participate has been fun.
Yeah.
She has workshops and everything and classes too.
Yeah. So you said that you work with nonprofits or for-profit groups. It just
whoever needs my help, basically. Yeah. I mean, there's really for-profit and nonprofit are very, very, very similar. Up until the point where you decide what to do with the money that you're making or not making. And in the art industry, there's it's very, everything kind of boils down to the same aspects, and the only difference is I have experience working with how boards function and fundraising and things like that, which is the biggest difference between a for-profit and a nonprofit.
Yeah. I have some a background in nonprofits also, so I know that the fundraising and all those issues are always just so critical.
Yeah, grant writing and
Yeah,
things
grant
like that.
writing. Yeah. So you've landed in the Harlem Valley now, and do you find it inspirational? What about the Harlem Valley draws you as a photographer?
Well, it's been interesting because I moved here right after I graduated with my master's degree, and we started having kids kind of right away, and we had a lot of relatives who were all kind of falling ill at the same time. So for the last probably 10 years, it's been very intense raising children and taking care of relatives. So I'm actually just at the point now, after living here for 12 and a half years, 13 years, I'm just now starting to explore the area and learn about different things in the community and be able to explore the Great Swamp and the Appalachian Trail and different art institutions and things like that. So it's a really big learning curve for me, and being able to explore my environment more.
Yeah, a lot goes on.
Yeah, I'm finding that out. I've been trapped a little bit lately, so this is kind of
there's so many artists around,
Yeah.
you know, there's just teeming with artists.
I know, and I'm really looking forward to, like, this has kind of been my goal for the next year, is to really explore the different options and opportunities and groups out there that align with things that I do and that I love.
Yeah. So when you're photographing now, are you using, pre-digital cameras, or are you going with digital? Or
Right. Lately, I have a new camera that's actually it's called a light camera, and it's got 16 different lenses, and it computationally combines all of the 16 pictures into one. So you can. It's really cool. But it's more of a little hobby for me to figure out how this camera works.
Yeah.
I do also still do traditional film photography. I enjoy, actually, a new project that I'm hoping to work on has been taking vintage photographs that I find at flea markets and kind of reworking them and cropping them to different elements that I find really inspiring. Like, if you've ever seen very old pictures from the 30s, the way people hold themselves and the gestures and that the way that they are composed for photographs is totally different than they are now with a different medium. You know, with cell phone cameras, it's just a whole different thing. So the idea of how gestures between people in photographs kind of can be singled out to communicate something that's very different than it is now is something that I have been drawn to lately.
That sounds really interesting. One of the things that I love about photography and photographers is when they take it like almost away from the photography and they say, yeah, this is photography, but this is what I'm doing with it. I'm not just taking a picture. I need to do more.
I think sometimes people get, in photography industry in itself, I think, or at least the art photography industry, I think sometimes people get really caught up in the camera. And there's a whole huge range of ways that you can produce art photography that really doesn't have anything to do with the camera itself. Like we were talking about pinhole cameras, and there's so many options with different ways to scan images and objects now to manipulate them and to either not manipulate them. So it's a big, huge world of things to be creative with. So I feel like some people get super focused on what lenses you have and what camera you have and is it the best. But you really, you can be creative in so many other outlets without.
And that's where we're going to have to end it, Genevieve.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Genevieve Jan.